From the world of politics to the world of business, this is Balance of Power. Live from Washington, D.C.
From Bloomberg's Washington, D.C. studios to our TV audiences worldwide, welcome to Balance of Power. Alongside Joe Matthew, I'm Anne-Marie Gordern.
Well, that was quick. Congressman Tom Emmer wins his party's nomination for Speaker and then drops out following a swipe from former President Donald Trump.
At the UN, Secretary of State Blinken issues a warning to Iran and other players in the Middle East to stay out of the conflict between Israel and Hamas.
And the United Auto Workers expanding its strike against the big three car makers as 5,000 more workers walk off a General Motors plant. Anne-Marie, we've got a lot to talk about today here.
Certainly do.
Not only the Speaker's fight that seems to have gone off a cliff again as soon as you get the nomination, that's a surefire way to be shown the door, apparently. But we've got breaking news on Donald Trump now and the special counsel's indictment against him here in Washington.
That's right. ABC's is saying that his ex-chief of staff, Mark Meadows, was granted immunity in the Trump special counsel probe. Is what ABC is saying is that he had told the special counsel that he warned Trump about 2020 claims of this election fraud. We also have to note, in Georgia, Trump again also had another individual, part of his legal team, Jenna Ellis, granted immunity, or she pleaded. She had a plea deal with these individuals. So
very emotional announcement there in the courtroom. This is remarkable because it's Donald Trump today who, as we just referenced, actually helped to derail the trajectory for Tom Emmer as a future speaker, remembering he was one of two candidates in this most recent pool who actually voted to certify the 2020 election results. And apparently that is a deal breaker if you're Donald Trump.
What was interesting, Joe, is that yesterday in New Hampshire, Trump said he got off the phone with Tom Emmer. He said he likes him. He's like, there's a great number of people that are running. And then today, it was a Truth Social saying no one should vote for him, kind of pulling the strings from behind and calling him a rhino.
Pretty incredible. As we turn now to the House Speaker's fight in the House, Republican Congressman Greg Murphy of North Carolina joins us. Congressman, welcome to Bloomberg. It's good to have you. Love to know what's going through your mind right now. It seems the most surefire way to not become Speaker is to win the nomination. What are we going to do from here?
Absolutely. You know, the religious belt, the sealess, which as monks used to wear, that was kind of a self-torture advice. I think I have mine strapped on pretty well. Go into the Republican caucus, and kind of that's what it's about. You know, sadly enough, we've gone through many individuals. I did not personally think McCarthy needed to be taken out. The 8 who did that, I just think they caused a lot of chaos. We've had really good individuals, but some members will get up and have a personal grind against them. What we need to do really is come together as a party. We're going to have our differences, but we have to understand that the real differences we have are between Republican and Democrat, not Republican and Republican. Mike Johnson was the runner-up to Tom Emmer. I think Mike would do a fabulous job. I think he could get the 217. Same with Kevin Hern. Those two individuals, I think, let's just say it's kind of insane to say, but they wouldn't have as many people against them as what we've had before. We need to be a caucus that says we start from yes and perhaps move to no, rather than no and move up to yes.
You invoked religion. I believe it was former President Trump who said the only individual who can maybe get to 217 is Jesus Christ. If Hern and Johnson didn't get it in the backroom dealings this morning, why would they be able to get the majority tomorrow or the next day?
Well, I think they're individuals. A lot of the heretofore individuals have had personal, done things in the past that somebody didn't like, or they were too radical in one regard, or vice versa, and any of those things. And I think Mike Johnson and Kevin Hern are very well liked across the conference. I don't think any of these individuals have taken votes that some people may have had a problem with, or a particular stance that somebody had a problem with. I see them as being people who really come out of this unscathed, or actually come into the battle unscathed, and perhaps can finally get consensus so that we can take it to the floor.
I'm looking at your tweet of Sunday, Congressman, when you wrote with sirens on X. We now have almost as many candidates for Speaker of the House as Taylor Swift has had boyfriends. Where are we now, Congressman? How many do we have now, and will it take Democrats to close the deal on this? I know this was discussed earlier with Tom Emmer. It's still being discussed with Patrick McHenry. If we start creeping up on a government shutdown, do the two parties need to work together?
Well, I don't think we'll get to that point. And the debate right now, I literally stepped out of conference because of some of the debate was going on, is whether to go back into restart, have a full forum again, or just to kind of have a mini forum of those individuals who were there today. The other individuals, in my opinion, have come to the part where they've been nominated, but we're not able to get to the votes. I don't personally think we need to start that monkey all over again. I would put the ones that today got voted out and see if we can move forward on those individuals.
Congressman, at what point do you just give Pro Tem Patrick McHenry the tools he needs to start legislating again? This is not going down well with Americans across the board. 21 days, there's paralysis on the House of Representatives floor.
Yeah. Well, part of that time, to be factual, Anne-Marie, is the fact we were in recess. So none of this would be occurring while we'd be in recess. That said, this is absolutely frustrating to the nth degree. Patrick Henry honestly does not want those powers, but they may be at some point forced upon him. Patrick has done an excellent job of leading the conference forward during these negotiations, but I don't think we're quite at that point yet, and he really, really does not want this job.
Well, that seems to actually be a qualifier in the world that we're in here. Right. Congressman, can you give us a sense what's going to happen for the rest of the day? Will there be another Republican conference meeting, and what will be the tenor of that meeting? We're hearing reports of people yelling at each other, using swear words, yelling at Matt Gaetz to sit down. What's going to happen tonight?
Well, I don't recall that Matt Gaetz got scolded today, but that may just be a matter of the day. You think about how all this began. It was really with Matt's personal vendetta against McCarthy. This is what we're debating literally at this very moment. Do we go back into another forum today? I'll stay there. I'm a surgeon. I'll stay up all night. I don't care. I'd rather have the break of dawn that we come out with a consensus candidate that can come to the floor and get 217. We'll have to see what in the next hour or two the process is going to be.
And what's the possibility of potentially putting someone out there that can get Democratic votes?
I don't think we're at that point yet, and it's hard to sell that to the American public.
21 days, we're not there yet?
Well, no.
There's a crisis in the Middle East. There's a government shutdown potentially November 17th. I mean, what else needs to be done?
Well, the crisis in the Middle East is being handled at this point by the president and our military. Nothing in the House at this point, short of a censure and a resolution to support Israel, has been vacated. That said, there's an absolute urgency to get this done and actually get back to passing appropriations bills, getting back to appropriating money where it needs to be for the country. But again, we have some folks that are begin at no, and want to move, and we're trying to get them to move to yes. But that's a hard hill to climb for some of these individuals.
Congressman, thank you. Republican Congressman Greg Murphy of North Carolina. We'd love to hear what happens when you guys do get behind closed doors once again. Thank you for sharing your afternoon with us here on Balance of Power as we turn now to our Reporters Roundtable, helping us decipher what we just heard from the congressman and might be hearing later, Bloomberg's Wendy Benjaminson and Mike Dorning. It's great to see both of you here. This idea of Democrats getting involved, we keep talking around this every day, Anne-Marie. I spoke earlier today with Democratic Congressman Sean Casten of Illinois about this potential of Democrats coming to the rescue. At that point, it was Tom Emmer. Things changed pretty quickly around here. Patrick McHenry was also invoked. Here's what he said.
Will the Republican Party decide to do what the people want and work with Democrats, or will the Republican Party continue just to fight with themselves? And that's really hard. If they're willing to do that, yes, we are here to do the people's work, but they have to be willing to actually to commit to some things that have become, anathema within their own caucus.
Mike Dorning, this feels almost like a game of chicken at some point. Should we believe that the two parties are talking? And if they're not, when does that start?
Well, from what I've heard, the two parties aren't really talking except for informally among people who are not leadership folks. It's a very hard thing for Republicans to support, to make a deal with Democrats, and it would be hard for Democrats to vote for a Republican for Speaker. So you'd probably have to see things get worse and then come under more pressure before you'd have any sort of cross-party alliance, given how bad things are here in Washington. That said, right now in the Republican Party, it looks like the differences within the party are hardening, and that they're not actually getting closer to bridging those gaps. In fact, the lines are getting drawn more sharply. The walls are building up higher within the party, and you have this whole layer of personal grudges now coming on top of these very strong ideological divisions. You have almost 3 different parties in the House Republican Party right now. So things are just getting tougher and more complicated.
They are. And to Congressman Murphy's point, which was a little bit odd, he was basically saying that Republicans need to go from the conference in the morning when they all have this discussion behind closed doors to then keep a chastity belt on to make sure that they can keep their vote there when they get to the floor. But I think what he was trying to say is, what you say in the morning, if there is a majority, then you have to go to the floor to get to 217. And he thinks Hearn or Johnson could be those next individuals, Wendy?
That was very good, by the way. I didn't quite know it.
Yeah.
That was my interpretation.
Very well.
The viewers write in.
I think that could be it. But stepping away from that for a moment, all due respect to the congressman, Mike Johnson is the architect of the plan to disrupt the Electoral College. So you're asking the Republicans who are not the 5 to 8, Freedom Caucus hardliners, people, the New York delegation who are from Biden plus 10 districts.
18 districts voted for Biden.
Exactly. You're asking them to vote for the guy who engineered the whole thing that led to January 6th? And what's in it for Democrats at this point to join the fight or to try to solve the fight for the Republicans? There's an old political adage, that when your enemy is drowning, throw him an anchor, or just watch. And I think at this point, the scroll of concessions that Republicans would have to make to Democrats to get them on board right now is impossibly long. So I do not see this getting better anytime soon.
What do you make of the Donald Trump evolution over the past 24 hours? Yesterday in New Hampshire, I'm staying out of this. Tom Emmer called me. They're all my friends. Great. I'm going to stay neutral. The second he got the nomination, we can show the truth post. Rhino Tom Emmer, referred to as globalist Rhino Tom Emmer, tragic mistake. That was quite a change here. Our viewers can read while you're talking.
Well, exactly. And it's even quicker than that because Trump's team was telling us probably while he was typing this on his phone, that he was going to let his allies take care of Emmer and he wasn't going to say anything. And then literally minutes later, this gets posted. And so Trump, is deciding, I guess, that he's going to pick the House Speaker by knifing or, politically knifing Emmer and getting him out of the race. But, who is it that Trump is going to like, that the moderate Republicans will accept,
But we're doing what Trump wants, which is he's injected himself into the conversation. This evening, we're not just talking about Tom Emmer. We're talking about the former president who wants to be kingmaker. Joe, we got to bring this line to you guys, what Eric Wasson is saying. He's our reporter on Capitol Hill. He said Longworth, that's the building where all the Republicans meet, just feels like an airport where flights canceled due to storm, everyone cranky, everyone is sitting on the floor. And that's pretty much what Capitol Hill does feel like. What's your sense of a timeline?
Well, it's hard to say right now, but I think it's not going to be cured quickly. And the reason for that is, these grudges, this crankiness, as you just said, is getting worse. And everyone's now proven that they have a veto. Trump has a veto. The traditionalists and the moderates vetoed Jordan. The hardliners vetoed both McCarthy and Scalise. So people don't have a desire to overcome differences, but they've all learned they have a veto. They've used it. There's no longer any sort of idea that, oh, no, you shouldn't overthrow the speaker. Oh, no, you shouldn't break with your party on a rules vote and create chaos in the House.
So this is an exorcism, is what you're saying.
If it works, it would be an exorcism. I don't know how long it would take, but you have to exorcise these demons out of the caucus, this veto demon. You're pretending you're senators or something, and then, gradually come to agreement. But right now, the temperature's going up rather than down. And actually, I do think that is one reason why, after most of these, conflagrations, the leaders have gone ahead and sent the members home. It's kind of like, with your kids when they're like, the tempers are going, but you got to send them each to their own room, and then, they can make up. That works in the workplace, and it works in Congress, too.
Feels like they need a dose of Rogan Loy for succession. You are not serious people. Get back to work. All right. Our thanks to Bloomberg's Wendy Benjaminson and Mike Dorning. Let's bring in Kyle Kondik now. He's the managing editor at Sabato's Crystal Ball at the University of Virginia Center for Politics. Kyle, just your reaction to this chaos we're seeing.
Look, the House Republicans are running out of candidates who could possibly be speaker, and I'm running out of adjectives to describe how crazy this all is. It's like they have the internal conference vote, and winning means that you lose, because if you win the vote, then you are revealed to not actually have basically all the Republicans behind you, and therefore you're eliminated. We've seen it with Jim Jordan. We've seen it with Steve Scalise. We've now seen it with Tom Emmer. So, who's it going to be? It's just crazy, and there's really no end in sight here.
Well, if you don't know, we don't know, Kyle. And I'm pretty sure the Republican conference doesn't know. So do we have a moment in the sun does everyone get a nomination? To Mike Dorning's earlier point, just give everybody a chance to do this, get rejected, get it all out of your system, and then cooler heads prevail? Or will we actually be talking about this on November 17th, on the eve of a government shutdown, watching it happen?
Look, there's a phrase popularized by Andrew Brandt, a great sports salary cap analyst. He said, "Deadline spur action." And so the deadline is November 17th, when we have to have some sort of government funding deal, or there's going to be a shutdown. And so we're getting close to there, but it's still several weeks away. And so, but that is sort of looming in the background as what we need to look at, because you got to think this is going to end at some point, but how it ends and who ends up holding the gavel is just a complete mystery. And I don't think there's any, I don't think there's some secret here as to someone knows what's going to happen. I don't think anyone knows.
Right.
I agree with you on that. How much of this will cost votes in November back in these congressmen and women's districts?
My guess is that the memories of this will fade pretty quickly whenever it does end up being resolved. Although, let's imagine a world, maybe there is a situation where a speaker gets in there with some, tacit or explicit Democratic support. That could spur primaries potentially. Or you have a situation where the House is just dysfunctional for the next 12 months. And maybe that plays into the sort of larger Democratic argument about Republicans and being unable to run Washington. But the memory for these things, again, I think is usually pretty short. And so the thing, I just remember the thing I think about the most is 10 years ago we had a government shutdown. That was the sort of only point during that 2014 election cycle when it looked like Democrats might have a chance to maybe save their Senate majority or make some ground in the House. And then the calendar turned, people moved on, a bunch of other stuff happened, and Republicans ended up having a good election that year. So I just think the memories can be pretty short here.
Kyle, we usually talk about campaign politics when you join us here, and I wonder if it's too early to start connecting the dots to campaign season, because Democrats clearly see a benefit here for their own brand when they can point to Republicans not only unable to govern, but even unable to pick a leader. Does this come out in the wash on the other end of this election cycle?
Look, again, I do think that for as extraordinary as this whole saga is, and basically unprecedented, at least in modern times, once there is a speaker in place, I would expect the focus to move on. And I think the presidential campaign really ends up setting the tenor for what the election is going to be about in 2024. You do have some important elections coming up in a couple of weeks here, specifically in Virginia, where both chambers of the state legislature are up. And, that's a state that, there's not a shutdown right now, but, there are a lot of federal employees in a state like Virginia. And so maybe there's some marginal impact there. But again, I just, I know Democrats are going to want to run against Republicans on this. I just don't necessarily know if it's going to really matter all that much, a year from now.
Interesting. Yeah.
Well, Well, when it comes to election news, we want to just end with this news we got at the top of the hour about former chief of staff to the former president, Donald Trump, Mark Meadows, granted immunity in Trump's special counsel probe, according to ABC News. On top of that, earlier today, we did know about Jenna Ellis, Trump's lawyer, pleading guilty. Looks like she struck some sort of agreement. How difficult is this all going to become for the former president as he has an eye squarely on 2024?
I mean, they sure seem to be climbing up the ladder. They're not at Trump yet, but I mean, these plea deals are kind of interesting. And, I struggle with this because here we have all this outstanding legal problems for the former president, and yet he's really, in a general election sense, he's polling better than he did in either this time in 2016 cycle or the 2020 cycle. He's leading his own party's nomination fight by a considerable amount, and yet you have to acknowledge the potential problems here for the president or former president down the line here from these legal matters. And I mean, the guy's just been so Teflon for so long that it's easy to kind of brush it off. But I mean, these sure seem like serious developments over the past several days.
Sure are. Kyle Kondik, thanks for joining. As always, he's managing editor at Sabato's Crystal Ball at the University of Virginia's Center for Politics. Coming up on Bloomberg, the United Auto Workers expanding their strike against General Motors. Bloomberg's Kaylee Lyons has the details next. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV.
Given that we don't want to speculate where the next plant might be or how long that might be out, we thought the prudent thing to do was to withdraw guidance, despite the fact that the underlying business was actually performing at the top end of our range prior to this. So we'll provide an update with investors as soon as it's over, but we're still focused on making sure that we execute every day.
That was the CFO of General Motors speaking earlier today on Bloomberg after the automaker reported quarterly results amid the ongoing UAW strike, one that incidentally just got larger. Bloomberg's Kaylee Lyons is here with more. Kaylee, it was a real opportunity to get a sense of the impact this strike is having on business.
Yeah, it's interesting. You aren't really seeing it showing up in the third quarter results because GM actually beat expectations. Earnings came in at $2.28 a share. That was well above what analysts forecast. Revenue came in about $1 billion north of expectations as well. It's the picture going forward that's really cloudy. As you just heard the CFO talking about, they pulled their guidance, which was for about $14 billion in profit this year because the strike makes the financial future just too hard to predict. The company said already it has cost them about $800 million. They think that will grow by $200 million per week. But no one knows how many more weeks this could go on. And of course, the strike, as you alluded to, Joe, just got even bigger today. Just hours after GM reported results, the UAW said another 5,000 workers are walking out of a factory in Texas that makes some of their highest profitable vehicles, the Chevy Tahoe, the GMC Yukon, the Cadillac Escalade, and that follows 6,800 workers associated with Stellantis walking out of a plant in Michigan yesterday. So this strike is now talking 45,000 workers. And what Sean Fain says in the statement when the UAW announced this was record profits equal record contracts. And of course, the UAW is looking for a raise, according to Bloomberg's reporting, in the ballpark of 25%. What's on the table from each of the big three automakers is about 23%. Still some daylight that needs to be closed here. But if you listen to Mary Barra, the CEO of GM, on the earnings call, she thinks their offer on the table is good enough. This is what she said.
Since negotiations started this summer, we've been available to bargain 24/7 on behalf of our represented team members and our company. They've demanded a record contract, and that's exactly what we've offered for weeks now. A historic contract with record wages that have increases that are substantial, record job security, and world-class health care. It's an offer that rewards our team members but does not put the company and their jobs at risk.
And what Barra said in a letter to shareholders today was that they need to retain 8 to 10% adjusted profit margins in North America, that she is not willing to accept unsustainably high costs. And it comes back to the job security she was just alluding to. If GM doesn't have enough profit, they can't invest, and that could risk jobs down the line.
You know what I find so interesting about today is it happened on a Tuesday.
Yeah.
Usually this happens on a Friday, and I wonder if that's like a distraction method that Sean Fain is using to put them in very uncomfortable waters.
Yeah,
executives.
On Friday, we had no escalation in the strike, and then Stellantis escalated on a Monday yesterday, GM on this Tuesday. You have to consider it did come on the day of the report, though.
That's true. Bloomberg's Kayleigh Lyons, thank you so much for bringing us that. Coming up, former U.S. Ambassador Marc Ginsberg will be with us. We're going to discuss the ongoing war between Israel and Hamas. That's next, right here on Balance of Power on Bloomberg.
We call on all member states to send a firm, united message to any state or non-state actor that is considering opening another front in this conflict against Israel, or who may target Israel's partners, including the United States. Don't throw fuel on the fire.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken at the UN earlier today, warning countries in the Middle East to stay out of the conflict there. Let's bring in former U.S. Ambassador to Morocco, Marc Ginsberg, to continue our conversation. Mr. Ambassador, it's good to see you. Thanks for coming back to see us on Bloomberg. I wonder how you rationalize at this moment the need for justice to be carried out versus the call for restraint that we are hearing from the Biden administration.
It's virtually an impossible needle to thread. After all, the Israelis are determined to decapitate the Hamas terrorist army in Gaza, and at the same time to pulverize any ability of Hamas to continue to build any weapons. I mean, how do you cleanse a terrorist organization in a matter of weeks? I mean, we've seen this picture before, and it doesn't look very good, particularly when you have so many civilians who are caught in the middle.
As a former ambassador, how do you think the administration should be drawing the line with Qatar, given the fact that they are the individuals that are discussing the transfer and the negotiations with these hostages? We've seen 4, so many families are hopeful maybe their loved ones will be released. At the same time, Qatar is responsible for a lot of aid to Hamas, as well as housing their political leadership.
I couldn't agree more with you. Qatar provided Hamas $369 million in what they deemed humanitarian relief last year. Qatar has been the benefactor for Hamas inside Qatar, where the political bureau of Hamas is located. The problem is that we're being held hostage by Qatar because we have a Air Force base there. The hostages are being negotiated directly through Qatar's relationship with Hamas. And yet at the same time, I can't for the life of me comprehend how the administration expects to be able to shut down and support Israel and shut down Hamas if Qatar permits its political bureau to operate.
We spoke yesterday with the former U.S. ambassador to Iraq and Turkey, James Jeffrey, who reacted to the U.S. deployment of warships in the Middle East, remembering we have not one but 2 now strike groups, one heading to the Eastern Mediterranean, the other heading to the Middle East. Here's what he said.
They're getting ready to fight if they have to for real, not just tit for tat and that kind of thing as we've seen before. This is a major, major military deployment, and it is designed to avoid a major war. And it is absolutely the right thing to do. Credit to them.
We had a sobering conversation with Ambassador Jeffrey, who, of course, has a long memory when it comes to geopolitics and military involvement. Ambassador, I wonder your thought here on the potential for a second or third front and if these deterrents will do their jobs.
We already have a bunch of fronts that are at low-level hostilities right now. I mean, the front in the north between Israel and Hezbollah is on what I would call small burner, and it could accelerate. You have Hezbollah in Syria with the Syrian government supporting Hezbollah. You have the United States forces being attacked by militias that are supported by Iran. But at the same time, I think Jim is absolutely correct. The United States deployment has been quite a deterrent because while Israel has not moved in force into Gaza, I suspect that when it does, Hezbollah will have to show and take orders from Iran to that effect. that it's prepared to make Israel's life pretty miserable, which it already has done by forcing the evacuation of all the settlements in the north of Israel.
President Biden today spoke with the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, an individual that he wanted to make a pariah when he was running for his campaign. But the two discuss, according to the White House, broader diplomatic efforts to maintain stability across the region and prevent the conflict from expanding. What should Riyadh's role be in this conflict? What can Mohammed bin Salman do?
I think the Crown Prince needs to, at the right point, reaffirm that he's not going to derail normalization of relations between Israel and Saudi Arabia, because that's exactly what Iran and its terrorist proxies want to see happen. Number one. Number two, I think it's important. I mean, after all, the Crown Prince is throwing his weight around considerably in the Arab world. He needs to be able to try to serve as a cautionary note to the Israeli government on avoiding civilian casualties. But at the same time, I think he realizes that unless the United States and Israel are able to enter in a defense agreement and it is in effect torpedoed by Hamas, he loses one of the most important foreign policy objectives that any Crown Prince that I can recall has ever undertook.
We started with Antony Blinken's remarks at the UN today, Ambassador, and there was quite a bit of news that came out of the UN today. I wonder your reaction to the Israeli ambassador to the UN demanding that Secretary General Antonio Guterres resign for his comments on Hamas's terror attack. He said it is important to also recognize the attacks by Hamas did not happen in a vacuum. Palestinians have been subjected to 56 years of suffocating occupation. Do you support the call for him to step down?
I've long ago given up on the Secretary General's impartiality when it comes to Israel. It is typical of him and developing countries in the UN to pile on Israel at the earliest opportunity. But the fact is that Israel has every right to, in effect, eradicate, I call it denazify, Hamas. And at the same time, look, let's face it, it's still hard to tell how many people in Gaza, of the 2 million, I mean, I've done the math myself, there's approximately 350 to 400,000 people who are above the age of 18 who are male, who are either members of Hamas's terrorist organizations or on direct contract by Hamas to build those tunnels. How do you eradicate those people and at the same time give the Palestinians in Gaza something better than being suffocated by another terrorist organization that may take over?
All right, former Ambassador Marc Ginsberg, thank you so much for your time and your insights this evening. Coming up, more on the fight for House Speaker. As we know, Republicans are gearing up to go into another conference this evening. Our political panel is next. This is Balance of Power.
President Trump posted something on his social media account that was encouraging people not to support Tom Emmer in a race that you can't afford to lose more than 4 votes. I think that could be damaging. I think Tom is doing his best to talk to each of the people who have questions about him and try to deal with those questions, but I think he's got some hurdles to overcome at this point.
Oh, he has a lot of things to overcome. That was from 3 p.m. today. What a difference 2 hours makes. The Republican Party is back to square one. Groundhog's Day once again in Washington, D.C. Let's bring in our political panel. Kristen Hahn of Rock Solutions and Maura Gillespie, founder of Blue Stack Strategies. Maura, let's start with you. So they go into this conference after they realize that there's going to be these never Emmers, just like there was never Scalises and never Jordans. And then we find out that Tom Emmer actually jumps into an SUV and leaves while the conference is still going on. Then the full headline came that he will no longer be the nominee to Speaker. Where does this leave the current Republican Party on the House side?
At a complete loss right now, because without having some semblance of a coalition to do this job, we're going to continue to be in Groundhog's Day, like you just said. So I think it's well past time to give Patrick McHenry, who is the Speaker pro tem, to just give him the powers to do what needs to get done so we can get through this congressional cycle, get through this year, get through these appropriations bills and the funding bills, and really just have some Republicans come to their senses. I don't know if that's possible at this point. As a fellow Republican, I am embarrassed for what's going on Capitol Hill, and the members should be even more so embarrassed and quite frankly ashamed of how they're behaving, because this is not going to make them, seem like they can govern to voters next year.
Well, Kristen, this is an interesting moment for Democrats because we keep asking lawmakers, Republicans and Democrats for that matter, at what point will you guys start talking? Will it be November 16th, the government shutdown? Will it be Israel? What brings people to the table here? Because it appears there is not a member of the Republican conference who can get to 217. So the question is, will there be Democrats who sit out a vote at some point with someone they can stomach? Maybe it's Patrick McHenry. Maybe it's another non-election denier like Tom Emmer. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting predicament that we're all in, and we're in uncharted territory right now. But there, I think, are some Democrats kind of in the middle of the road. What I'm hearing is Republicans haven't come to them, haven't made any gestures towards them. And so, that's going to have to happen. Now, the Democrats are the ones that I feel like, want to make sure that we're funding the government. They don't use these opportunities for a government shutdown as leverage, like a lot of times the Republican Party does. Unfortunately, I think that there are just some people in the Republican conference who are okay with letting the government not operate. Mm-hmm. We've seen that a lot have been raising money off of it, including Matt Gaetz. So, I think at some point those conversations have to start happening. And what they look like, I think, can take a lot of different, there can go a lot of different ways.
Yeah, Joe, you spoke to a lawmaker today, and his point was it has to hit rock bottom.
Right.
I don't know how we're not there yet, 21 days in, but allegedly this is not rock bottom
like what
yet.
does capitulation actually look like? We did speak with Congressman Sean Casten, indeed a Democrat from Illinois, about this idea of cats and dogs working together. Here's what he said.
The Republicans are going to have to hit rock bottom before they are willing to reach across the aisle and work with Democrats. And, someone asked me recently, what does that mean? And I said, I thought we were already there, but maybe that means they have to, nominate Speaker Santos. I don't know.
Okay, interesting. Speaker Santos, by the way, he's got a Twitter poll out on whether he should be Speaker. Maybe that is the definition of rock bottom.
I'm not trying to be flippant here, but that individual is under a number of indictments and potentially is facing jail time. Mr. Santos from Long Island, Queens area. Maura, what do you think? What do you think of all this? Is this the time now? Rock bottom? Are we near the rock bottom point for your Republicans to say, all right, let's make a deal with the Democrats?
We are already well past rock bottom, and it shouldn't take it to be a Santos speaker to get us to talk to Democrats. I think the Republican Party is being incredibly selfish right now, and members who, again, these members, like the accused sex offender Matt Gaetz, who, kind of blew this all up without a plan. He afterwards ran to the cameras and said that he would have voted for Steve Scalise. But then why did Jim Jordan throw his name in the ring, right? So this is why we're at where we're at, is because the people who are in the right flank, these obstructionists, one, do not know how to govern. They certainly don't know how to lead. But they had no other plan but to throw a bomb in the middle of what was happening in conference and what was happening in the House, and didn't want to clean up the mess afterwards. And they still don't, because all they're focused on is, as you said, fundraising off of it, campaigning off of it. But what sensible donor is going to look at the GOP right now and say, you know what, that's who we should have governing, that's who we should have leading our government, our federal government. So it's completely insane to me, and I am beyond frustrated as a fellow Republican to see how embarrassing this is, truly has been. We are missing an adult in the room. I am just beyond comprehending what's going on here, but it's really frustrating. And again, these are selfish people who are only out for themselves and don't even want to go near the word compromise, which is what we need our legislators to be doing.
So that sounds like a no on a Speaker Santos. Did you see, by the way, can we look at that poll again? Did you see the choices were yes and yes? This is comedy hour now on Capitol Hill. Anne Marie, I don't think it will be George Santos. We just got a new list, it looks like, of candidates.
Representative Elise Stefanik, she said there was the deadline for announcement for the speakers at the candidate forum, which is taking place in 14 minutes' time at 6 p.m. on Capitol Hill. Byron Donald, Chuck Fleischman, Mark Green, Kevin Hurd, Mike Johnson, Roger Williams.
Okay, so a couple of familiar names there. We had Fleischman and Williams, and we're going to do this all over again.
But the question remains, even if one of these individuals can get a majority in conference, and I'm sure one of them can any one of these names get to 217 on the House floor?
Kristen, I think it's the contrary. I think the surefire way to never be Speaker is to be elected nominee.
Yes, I think so.
That's as soon as that happens.
This is why it's so beyond everybody, looking at what's going on right now, who gets to 217. And a lot of these nominees out of the conference meetings that they're having behind closed doors are coming away with 117 votes, like 100 votes short of where you need to get. I just don't see how this works out any other way other than some sort of compromise.
We're not going to figure it out tonight, I know that. Coming up with our political panel, we'll have much more as another defendant in the Georgia elections case pleads guilty. Trump legal next on Balance of Power. This is Bloomberg TV.
What I did not do, but should have done, Your Honor, was to make sure that the facts the other lawyers alleged to be true were in fact true. If I knew then what I know now, I would have declined to represent Donald Trump in these post-election challenges. I look back on this whole experience with deep remorse.
Former Donald Trump attorney Jenna Ellis there pleading guilty in an emotional plea today in the Georgia elections case, making her the fourth defendant so far to do so. As we turn back to our political panel, Kristen Hahn of Rock Solutions, Maura Gillespie of Blue Stack Strategies with us. I will remind everyone we had a breaking news headline at the beginning of this hour. The former chief of staff in the Trump White House, Mark Meadows, granted immunity in the special counsel case here in Washington. So, Maura, I'll start with you. With the walls closing in here on Donald Trump, these seem meaningful. And when someone like Mark Meadows is testifying, a former attorney is testifying, how much more does Donald Trump have to worry about today than he might have a couple of days ago?
I would think a lot more, but I also see Donald Trump as somebody who, again, we watched this happen just an hour ago, really figure out a way to distract people by throwing attention elsewhere, like he did by saying earlier today that he wasn't going to get involved in the speaker's race, and then ultimately downing Tom Emmer. So by getting involved and saying he wasn't fit to be speaker and called him a rhino. Also, the Mark Meadows thing, I will say, as somebody who knew Mark Meadows and knows that his character, it is really a shame that he's going to get granted immunity because he played an integral role in what happened on January 6th and leading up to January 6th and beyond that. And the fact that he will get away with essentially what his role was is sad for America, because they should have to hear from him directly what his role was and what he did and why.
I thought she was about to say something nice about him.
Yeah, I want to bring you...
No.
I want to bring you a little bit more of what ABC is saying. According to their sources, Meadows also told the federal investigators Trump was being, quote, dishonest with the public when he first claimed to have won the election only hours after polls closed on November 30th, 2020, before the final results were in. So he is saying now, maybe hindsight is 2020, but he's saying now that he was telling Trump that this isn't inappropriate. Do you not agree?
What the January 6th committee unveiled was the role that Mark Meadows had in perpetuating the conspiracy theories, such as the Italian satellite and that whole conspiracy theory. He brought it up to the highest levels of our government. He was the chief of staff to the President of the United States. And by even looking into some of these conspiracy theories, he validated them. He should be held accountable for that. So I don't see that this is anything more than him trying to save his own self. I'll be PC here. But yes, he's just trying to save his own skin, and that's really where it's at with Mark Meadows. He's out for himself, and the fact that he got immunity is, for someone like me who wants to see him held accountable, is disappointing.
Kristen, Italian satellites, Hugo Chavez. Should Mark Meadows be able to do this, or is it more important to go to the top, in this case, to Donald Trump?
I would agree. I mean, the chief of staff to the President of the United States holds a very, very important cabinet-level position in our government. And so I would agree that, raising it to that level. Now, what does this mean for Donald Trump? Because ultimately, Donald Trump needs to be held accountable for his role in all of this. And I think that's what you're seeing with a lot of these people who are scared and finally starting to talk about this. The January 6th committee did a really good job of bringing a lot of this information to the forefront. But yes, would I like to see it? But I also would like to see, I don't know what he's going to say. And, I would like to see the president held accountable.
Well, if Trump is held accountable, it does look like, though, at this moment, the clouds are starting to darken around him. But he's supposed to be the nominee. And what every Democrat says is Biden has to run because it's going to be Trump. What if it's not Trump?
Well, I think, all signs pointing that it will be Trump.
Even
but I
you
think
have headlines
that
like this. Individuals,
it's
striking deals.
Time after time after time, like you said, he just played a role in tanking Tom Emmer's, speakership, potential speakership. Time after time after time, he gets away with this. And it's very unfortunate. Now, undoubtedly, the Biden campaign and the staff and the president himself are looking at the different, the different scenarios. Say it weren't Donald Trump and it were something else. And obviously, you approach each one of those candidates very differently. But I don't see any one of them really rising to the top and emerging as somebody that, a lot of those folks at the base of the Republican Party want to support, at least not right now.
Well, there's a lot to ask here when it comes to how someone can navigate a campaign with 4 indictments and headlines like this dropping more. I guess I'll go back to you for a final thought in our remaining moment. Are we going to see Donald Trump holding rallies, doing the traditional campaigning that comes with a run for president, or are we going to see him in court illustrations all year?
It'll be a mix of both. What I find to be most concerning was also his recent rally where he told voters not to go out and vote. We will continue to lose as a party if Donald Trump is at the top of our ticket. We will also continue to lose if we have members of Congress who can't grow up and stop being so selfish. So the GOP really needs a come-to-Jesus moment.
Wow.
Lots of religion in this show today.
From start to finish.
Yeah, from start to finish. Thank you all for joining us. Kristen Hahn of Rock Solutions and Maura Gillespie of Blue Stack Strategies. Check out the Washington Edition newsletter for these stories and more, especially the speaker fight.
That's right. It's biblical. We'll see you back here tomorrow on Balance of Power. This is Bloomberg.